What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
Would you say Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
What's up, Rebels? Welcome back to Rebel Radio, the weekly show where I bring you the rebels who are shaping our culture. I'm your host, Josh Levine. This week, I'm excited to bring you one that we recorded face-to-face instead of the video chat, which I've mentioned before I can't stand. Well, I still like doing it, but, you know, being in person in the room with somebody, there's no substitute for that. So my guest this week was gracious enough to invite me into his home. We had a nice social distant interview, and it was great. David Alexander is my guest. He's the founder of the Icon Collective, which is a music production school in LA and now online available across the world. David's got some incredible stories of his journey to building that business. The interview starts out with a story that's cut off. You're going to hear the second half of it. Unfortunately, the way we were setting up for recording, we didn't capture the front end, but he's telling me the story of what happened one time. He went to the Ultra Music Festival in Miami, and I'm not going to spoil the end of it for you because you'll hear it, but he didn't have a ticket. He decided last minute to just go, and it really answers the question, what would happen if you asked for nothing and just went to be of service? And he had this incredible experience that we'll share with you. He's got some other great stories later in the episode about how he got his business started, some really big lessons about having faith, trusting in the process, really having a clear vision of what you're in it for. Good stuff. I'm excited to share it with you, and let's get into it.
This thought in the cab, you know, and I get out and I see a security guard with a clip, and it hit me. I was like, hey, where's the artist entrance? He goes, you need to walk down this hall, this line right here, and you'll see a break in the fence around the corner. I was like, guys, come with me. They're like, what are we doing? I'm like, just trust me. So
they're like, who is this guy?
So we start walking back there, and sure enough, the fence opens up, and I remember the guy's name, Smokey. So as I'm walking up, I see Goldie leaving. There's the guy, and you know, I know who Goldie is, so
sure.
I stop him, I introduce myself, I tell him about the school, I tell him I'm a big fan, we exchange cards, and the guy at the artist relations is watching all this go down, so it looks like I actually know Goldie, right? So, and the other thing is, I was in this mindset that I want to be of service. Like, I don't want to ask for anything, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I walk up and say, Moki, how's your day going? And blah, blah, blah. And he goes, we start talking. Eventually goes, so what brings you here? And I noticed that there's a schedule, and BT's playing the breakbeat stage at 7:30. It's about 7:15. I said, I'm just here with my artists. They're doing a guest appearance with BT on stage. He goes, okay, just a minute. So I walk over back to them, right?
Oh, my God.
And he starts looking through folders and folders and folders and like, what's going on? I'm like, just trust me, you know? And I see him pick up the phone, and I'm like, oh, it's all over, because our names aren't on there, you know?
Right.
And so he goes, hey, David, come over here. I walk over, and he goes, here's your artist passes. He goes, you want me to get you a golf cart so we can take you over there? And he goes, no, I know where it is. So I give him I said, these are backstage passes. You guys have a good time. They were like, what?
That's amazing.
And so I walked in with my backstage pass. I'm waiting for my friends to get in. And Oakenfold and Prodigy are playing the main stage. So we're fighting our way through the crowd, and as I'm fighting, I get a glimpse of the wristband, and it hits me. Like, what am I doing here? I should be backstage, just exploring the event, because the event was made for electronic music, and I've devoted my life to electronic music, and, you know, it's all good.
Yeah.
So I said, I'll see you guys later. Like, where are you going? I'm like, don't worry about it, you know? So I walk up to the front where the rails are, and I show the security guard, I need to get backstage. This guy just picks me up, drops me over the fence, right? And there's two entrances to the main stage. So I walk up to the first guy, and I was like, hey, I got friends I'm meeting on stage. He goes, now with that wristband, you're not, that's for the breakbeat stage. This is the main stage. I'm like, no problem. Moki must have made a mistake. And I'm walking off, and I'm like, what happened? I was like, I asked him for something. I'm like, I broke my rule. So I go to the other guy, and I just introduce each other. How's your day? As I've been here all day, it's been hot. I was like, hey, would you like me to get you something? I just came from the hospitality tent. I don't mind. He's like, yeah, I'd really like a cup of coffee. Hadn't seen the hospitality tent, didn't know if there was one. I was like, okay, I'll be right back. I go through these two semis, there's a white tent, and sure enough, it's a hospitality tent. So I'm pouring him a coffee, and there's like ice bucket with a bunch of Red Bulls. I don't drink Red Bull, but something told me, take 2 Red Bulls. So I put it in my back pocket, and I grabbed an apple. Gave him his coffee. He goes, so what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm here to meet some friends on stage a little bit later. Future friends. He looked at my wristband. He goes, I'm sorry, man, that's the wrong wristband. I'm like, oh, no problem. I'm sure Moki got confused. No, it was really good to meet you. He goes, right, likewise, you know. So I'm walking away. After I take about 15 steps, he's like, hey, David. I turn around. He was like, I like you, man. Go ahead. So I'm like, cool. So I'm walking up the ramp. I'm crushing the stage. I see 40,000 people. I'm like, I'm gonna go hang out with, you know, the crew that's on the side of the stage waiting for the artists to come out, and we're just gonna enjoy the show together. So I'm standing on stage and I'm looking around this massive stage, and it's the DJ, 2 go-go dancers, 3 camera crew, a couple of tech crew, and nobody else. And I'm standing up there looking crazy, sticking out like a sore thumb. And I'm like, I had a moment of panic, like, okay, now what am I gonna do? And I noticed this guy playing had a keyboard rig or something way off in the corner. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. It turns out he's the VJ, right? And I'm talking to him, and it dawns on me that last year as I was getting off the plane, I was wearing a producer's backpack called, it's kind of I forget what it's called, but it's sort of a secret pack. It looks like a normal pack, but it's made for hard drives and laptops and headphone cases and wires, specifically made for DJs. Yeah. And he had the same one. I said, hey, are you a producer? He's like, no, I'm a VJ. I do all the visuals, you know. Cool. So we talked, and we got our bags, and that was it. And as I'm talking to him, I'm realizing it's the same guy I met the year before as I was getting off the plane. And I was like, hey, do you remember getting off the plane and talking to a guy that had a backpack? He's like, yeah. I was like, that was me. He was like, oh, how crazy. Well, what are you doing here? Like, I'm just here to meet friends, you know? And we're talking, we're having a good time, and I'm asking him, so how's your day? And he said, man, I had a hard night last night, and I really could use a drink, and there's nothing here. He goes, but the only thing I brought is vodka. And I was like, let me guess. You drink Red Bull vodka? He was like, that's my drink. And I popped out the 2 Red Bulls in my back pocket.
Oh my God.
And we poured each other a drink. And then he gets a phone call, and his whole face changes. I'm like, what's wrong? And he goes, oh man, I got a problem. And he goes, I have 2 friends that I invited. They're at the gate, and they won't let him in. And in that moment, I knew he was going to ask me to go get his friends. And I was totally cool with it because that's where I was supposed to be, right? So I'm like, can you do me a favor? I said, absolutely. He goes, do you mind running all the visuals for Oakenfold while I go get my friends? I'm like, do you know how to do this? I'm like, I'm a musician, I'm a producer. Right. I understand contrast, tension, release. He goes, let me see. And I was like, well, show me what's up. He goes, all the keys, triggers, different visuals, and these are the switches for the cameraman. This camera's on the audience, this is on the DJ, and this is rolling camera. And here's all your lights, you know? So I'm playing in sync, the DJ's doing a build-up, and right before the drop, I just black everything out, the stage goes black, and when the drop hits, I flash the front lights on the audience, and I flip the camera on for the audience, and the people see themselves on the screens, and the whole place goes crazy. He's like, and then he just walks off, right? So for the next 30 minutes, I'm like, doing all the visuals for Paul Oakenfold on the main stage at Ultra, and my friends are like, where are you? I'm like, look at stage left. What are you doing? I'm doing all the visuals. So
that's insane.
So crazy what can happen when you kind of follow your intuition, you know, and just
what a story, man.
Just trust, you know. And I'm such a fan of visuals and music. You have no idea. Like, that probably would have been an alternate career choice for me. So to have had that experience is like really, really interesting.
That's amazing. I'm blown away like that. Like, you know, I mean, what a great lesson, first of all, to not ask for stuff. Right. Because I think that goes so counter to the way we think and to what we think about success and getting shit done. And
yeah, to be of service is like, for other people, I think is so important, first and foremost, you know? Yeah. Because I think through that, you kind of find a better path for yourself, you know? It sets a different tone, I think.
Well, let's talk about that, man. I'm
Yeah.
so excited to dig into this.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you welcoming us into your home.
Of course. I mean, it was really cool to meet you and hear your history and to learn that you're responsible for those merging of corporate and underground culture that I found so interesting back in the day. I vividly remember those Scion commercials and thinking,
Sure.
wow, someone's exposing the culture, you know, in an interesting way. So
Fun times. But yeah, so I'm excited to talk about your path and your extraordinary ability to be of service. And take me back to the beginning. I know you. Music is your life. And so, do you remember the first record you ever bought?
I do, and it's going to date me. And it's a song called by Bachman Turner Overdrive. You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet.
Yeah.
I remember that being my first single, and the second one was My Sharona
Okay.
by the Knacks.
Yeah.
You know, that must have been like 71, 72. I must have been like 4 or 5 years old or something.
Big records.
Yeah, big records. But my mom used to play piano in church, and my dad used to go to church 3 times a week.
Wow.
To go see my mom.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how they met. But I always kind of grew up with the piano in the house, and my parents are immigrants, so they came here to pursue an education for myself, and the expectation is that I would have been a medical professional or an engineer,
Sure.
or any of these professions that were, that required a high standard of education, but also guaranteed a certain aspect of lifestyle. And I actually was studying at the University of Texas, aerospace engineering, but I would go see this band on the weekends that were playing funk and R&B and covering music, and just the keyboard player was really amazing, was really inspiring. So I ended up just getting a keyboard rig like he had and putting a band that was terrible and imitating what they were doing. And one day these guys came to my job and said, hey, we want to take you to lunch, and our keyboard player just got picked up by Prince, and we want you to join the band. We're playing 6 nights a week. And I said, I ain't got time for you. I'm on a scholarship. I got a part-time job. And the bass player was like, you see the suit, don't you? I'm like, yeah. He pulled out a piece of paper. He's like, these are all the gigs we have in the next few months. That's how much money you're going to be making. 5 minutes later, I was knocking on my boss's door, and I gave him 2 weeks' notice. I dropped out of college. I didn't tell my parents for like 2 months.
No way.
And it was the most stressful time of my life because I had to learn 45 songs.
Sure.
I had to do 4 sets, and I had 2 weeks to learn it. And I was really, really green at that point. You know.
What was the band?
It was called The Business. They used to be a cover band in Austin. And Austin had a really, and still has a thriving live music scene. The University of Texas is there, so every year 40, 50,000 kids encroach into a 6-mile radius.
Yeah.
And they're hungry for entertainment, So musicians can really make a good standard of living there. And I did that for about 2.5 years. 3 years.
Side note, but we sort of look down on cover bands, right? And but I think it's the ability to perform music is such an important skill, right? And obviously, if you're a professional musician, that's how you make a lot of your money. We all can think of great songwriters, musicians who are not great on stage, and so I always find it fascinating that we sort of group we want to see the person that sang it originally sing it on stage, even if someone else could do it better.
Right.
Right.
I agree.
And I'm sure you have. I've seen amazing cover bands who are just maybe better than the original.
Yeah.
And anyway, I find that fascinating, the way our brains think about that, right?
I agree with you. I see a lot of emerging artists posting covers of other people's songs on Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to me that every single person, I believe, has the gift of creativity. There's a lot of principles that need to be put into place for a person to trust the process enough to believe that they are capable of creativity. And that's not something that's taught in schools.
Sure.
And even nowadays, when it comes to music production or engineering schools, they don't talk about the mindset that you need to have as an artist, because it is a journey of faith. You have to cross the threshold of the unknown, leave everything that you know of safety, discover something of value, and then have the courage to bring it back and share it with people. And in each one of those processes, you have to face fears, and you have to lean into those fears, and you have to go beyond the fears. So
you did that. Joined this band.
I did that not knowing that that's what I was doing in the beginning.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, of course.
And that's what got me into music.
What you talked about your parents, and there's the what we think of as the immigrant work ethic, right? People come to this country. We know many of the greatest businesses, greatest achievements were created by people that came here and had something to prove, right?
Or nothing to lose.
Yeah, maybe that too.
Yeah.
How much do you think that affects you and your approach to getting things done?
I mean, 100%. It affects all of it. There was at one point when I moved away from home to pursue music full time, and I was thinking about my struggle. And at that same time, my mom was sharing me the story of coming to New York, not knowing the language, $12 in her pocket, and just buckling down and doing what she had to do. And I'm thinking, I've got more than $12 in my pocket. I understand the language.
Right.
I have skills. I have ability. Why am I living in fear of pursuing a goal? So having that as a background, I think, was a big factor in me having confidence and being able to do things that people normally wouldn't feel comfortable doing.
So do you carry that with you now? Like, obviously, now you have means, right? You have resources. And I think, sometimes the more we have, the harder, the harder it is to do stuff.
Right? To take risks.
Yeah. So do you find that popping up over the years? Like, I don't know, do you find yourself getting comfortable and having to go back to those memories and think, okay, what would mom do? Or what would I do if I didn't have any?
I think it's all about setting goals, because if you don't have a plan for tomorrow or what you're going to do 3 months from now or 6 months from now, a year from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, you don't have a way of understanding what type of investment in time, energy, money, resources, people it's going to take to get there.
Yeah.
But if you do have a goal, you know that whatever you're risking, there's a benefit of a reward, and that kind of eliminates that complacency.
Sure.
I mean, you could say I have means now. I mean, I live a comfortable lifestyle, but at the same time, for the last 15 years with my business partner, we've been saving everything that we've been accumulating so we can make the next jump. And we just made a huge investment in, building a campus and designing a 30,000 square foot facility from scratch. And I mean, this house that I'm in right now doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the lender. And
Right.
his house doesn't belong to him. It belongs to the lender.
Yeah.
And the money that we saved for 15 years doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the business and the lender. But I don't think there's ever a stage in your life where what you risk doesn't turn around and reward you equally, But
Interesting.
it takes experience to trust that process, to know that the important thing is to put a step forward, even if you don't necessarily know all the steps that are along the way, But a lot of people don't see all the steps in the process, and that prevents them from taking the first one. But it's a journey, like walking through fog. You don't see all the steps when you take the first step. You can see the next one, but not the one after that.
Right.
But you have to take the next one to see the one after that. It's
So-
the process that gets you there.
So walk me through that. So you're in this band, and then how do you get from that to taking the step to launch a school?
I saw that the band was basically on a revolving circuit. Some of the guys are still there 20 years later. They have their homes, their boats, they're doing really well. But I was thinking, is this it? Am I just going to be playing these same clubs, these same cities for the rest of my life? And no, there was more that I wanted to do. So I found out about a school that focused on contemporary music, and I went to the very first keyboard program that they had. And a week after graduating that, I landed a touring gig with a major artist, and I was on the road for almost 2 years. And then I noticed...
Who'd you tour with?
I toured with the Gap Band, I toured with Shaka Khan, I did stuff with George Clinton, just a lot of different artists in the R&B scene. But I was noticing that the musical directors, when we weren't on tours, they were producing records on MPCs and
Right.
had home studios. And I just got interested in production, and I thought that engineering was the way to do that. And I went to an engineering school and graduated, realizing that I was a technician. I knew how to set up a microphone. I knew how to set up reel-to-reel tape machines and run an SSL. But I didn't understand anything about sequencing or programming or the art of creating music. So that was kind of like my genesis.
And so what were the options at that time? This is 15 or more years ago, right?
So it's like 92.
Right. So now we have Icon and we have other music school. Right. There's a growing segment of music production schools, right?
Yeah, there are actually.
What was there at the time?
At that time, there was really nothing that was artist focused. It was all engineering.
Yeah.
And I had completed the program and was starting to produce music on Cubase. I didn't have an artist to work with. I had no projects, but there was a video game called Quake, which the music had been produced by Trent Reznor. And it was very ambient, but the game was really high paced. So just as an exercise on learning, using these tools, with another partner of mine, we decided to rescore the music for Quake and just put it out on the internet. And,
that's cool.
And what ended up happening is the company that produced Quake got a hold of it and called us and said, hey, we're producing Quake 2. Would you like to submit music?
Nice.
And so based on that, we got into producing music for video games. And then I got called back to work at the engineering school as a counselor. And I realized that, the majority of the kids didn't want to be engineers. They were artists wanting to learn how to produce their own music. So that was kind of like the genesis of an artist-based production program. And started the program with Musicians Institute, and then a year and a half into working with them, realized that they really didn't completely understand the vision at that point, and got together with my now business partner, Christopher White, and said we should go do this on our own. And just took a leap of faith and started small with about 15 students and organically grew it from there.
Real quick, what'd you learn from the Gap Band, Chaka Khan, those are legendary, genre-defining musicians.
Wow.
What'd you learn working with them?
I think the most important thing I learned, just like musically, would be that it's about pocket, it's about groove. You could play 3 notes, but if you put them in the wrong space, they're not going to mean as much. So, really, timing and groove is what I really began to understand about working with those guys.
Sure.
Right now, a lot of the music that's being sequenced all falls on the grid, and it's such a thin line where everything happens. And when you play in a band with people, they all have their own sense of what time is. So the guitar player might be a little bit ahead of the snare, and the bass player might be a little bit behind the kick drum. And that doesn't move at all, even though it all falls within a particular time.
Sure.
And that push and pull of the human experience is what I think really resonates with a lot of people about music and groove.
I think that's an interesting... It's an interesting insight, because I think, part of what we love about music is the imperfection. And that's harder and harder to do with the technology that we have.
Yeah.
Right? I've actually seen videos with the guy showing you how to mess it up on purpose, right? Take things off beat or whatever. But I'm sure there's a temptation to kind of like let everything line up and make it easy and be done with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's certain styles of music where that really, like a lot of the early industrial techno was very mechanical.
Yeah, if you're Richie Houghton, you can't.
Yeah,
you're not gonna be offbeat.
It was very mechanical, but now I think even those styles of music are starting to impart a lot of different feels. But yeah, when you're learning and you don't know, you want to quantize everything, but you're wondering why is everything so stiff, Just one last comment I would make about that is because I was at a music school, there were a lot of guitar players there, and they would all try and play Jimi Hendrix songs. And they sort of had the right tone, they were playing the right notes, but it never sounded quite right. And I was like, why? What is it about what he's doing that's so different? So I took a Jimi Hendrix song with the whole band playing and I imported it into Cubase. And Cubase had the ability to move the grid to their beats and show you how time was speeding up and slowing down over a certain number of bars. And what I noticed by analyzing that song is that within one bar, the first 2 beats, they were playing that about 98 beats per minute. And then the next 2 beats, they were playing that at about 88 beats per minute. So within one bar, they were speeding up and slowing down together.
Wow.
And that cyclical push and pull of the groove is what made that song so special. And I was like, why isn't anyone teaching these kids the importance of groove and feel? Because if they would add that to the right notes and to the right tone, they would get more to the essence of what the song is really about. But it's interesting because it took technology in order for me to discover that the untechnology was what was magical about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but it's what you talked about, right? You're coming at it as a musician, not as an engineer.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And those are different priorities.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you guys decided to start this school.
Yeah.
How's that work? Like, I think for any business, getting your first customers, right? If you're a musician, getting your first show,
Yeah.
right? So you said you opened with 15. Like, how do you get 15 people to trust to take a chance on a school that's unproven and has no reputation?
It's interesting. I mean, a lot of the first group of students were people that we had educated in the past, that we were connected with the other schools, and they had finished their programs, and they felt like they hadn't really received the education they were looking for.
Yeah.
So we went back to them and offered them an alternative, a continuation, and they all believed it and jumped on board.
So the other day you were saying something about there's a seminar you went to? Tell me about that.
I just, at the time I was hustling for gigs, and I got a random gig as a field recording engineer just to make sure the audio was being captured at a seminar. And it was a wealth building seminar in Florida.
Okay.
And it was actually Donald Trump was sort of like the main person that was putting the seminar together. But
he's like the keynote speaker?
The keynote speaker,
wow.
But he had other people involved in the industry. And
Right.
there's one guy that was up there, and I obviously, at the time I didn't care what they were saying, but I had to listen to make sure there's no clicks and pops and distortion and all that stuff. And one guy said, you don't have to be at your destination. You just have to be walking so strongly that people will get behind you as if you're already there. And that statement, for some reason, just rung a huge bell, and it just made me realize that if I state that I'm going to start a school, and I strongly believe it, and I use the correct words, other people will believe it, and it'll come to life. So I immediately came back, and I told my business partner, in April we're going to start a school. It doesn't matter if it's one person in our bedroom, 3 people in a small office, or 10 people in a classroom. It's happening on this date.
Yeah.
And even though we don't know how it's going to happen, we're stating that it's going to happen, and we're going to commit everything we have to making it happen. So we started looking for locations. We found a place in downtown, 4-city block entertainment complex, basically for a movie and video production with no sound component there. And just asked the president of the location that, I think the words that you speak are really important too, and how you state your intentions. I told him in April, we are opening a school and we would love for it to be here. Would you be opposed to having a music educational facility within your entertainment complex? And he was really excited about it. He goes, what do you need to make it happen? I said, I just need a conference room so I can bring my clients so they can see where it's going to be, and we can start the classes in April. He goes, I'll give you the conference room for free, and I'll personally give everybody a tour of the facility. So I went back to my prospective clients and I said, we have a location, and the school is going to be in this place in April, and we just want you to come down, see the curriculum, put your deposits down, and meet the president and take a tour. So they all showed up. The clients didn't know that we didn't have the location, and the location didn't know that they weren't clients yet. But but because we believed that it was going to happen so strongly, we spoke as if it already was, and everybody got on board. And that day we took about $65,000 in deposits, and we bought the gear that we needed, and we put our deposit down on the space, and that's how it got started.
That's
no
incredible.
No money, just a belief,
You're my hero. No, I mean, I'm not kidding, because, it's so easy to think about all the reasons why not to do that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
and sometimes those are legitimate and you have to listen to them.
Very valid
But
reasons a lot of
sometimes
the times.
you're never going to take that first step if you let that get in your way.
You know, I was just talking to this with my business partner today. I said, do you realize that we started the construction of the new building without knowing a pandemic was coming, without knowing that there was going to be a financial crisis, without knowing that there were going to be so many parameters that if we knew, we never would have done it at this point.
Sure.
And just a lot of things that have happened between now and then have really worked in our favor. And that's really important, where you put your focus. We could have thought of 500 reasons why in January now would not have been the right time.
Yeah.
But, you know, at some point you just have to decide and move forward, you know, be ready to pivot and move and make changes along the way, you know.
So are you just naturally good at that? Is that, or is there a trick to it?
I think that comes back to my mom,
Yeah.
you know, not knowing anything and just making a commitment, a belief that there was something better, and that if she just took a chance that she would find it, you know. But that takes, it does take a lot of courage, and it takes the ability to push back all the fears, which is all the voices in your head telling you why you shouldn't do it, you know. And we all have that
Sure.
every day for every aspect of what we do, whether it's creative or moving forward with a commitment in a relationship, or selecting a job, or pursuing a career, or buying a car. You know, if you think about it, our whole life is creative. Every day you're making creative decisions, you know.
Yeah.
But fear's a bastard, man. Fear will get in there and freeze you up and keep you from moving forward, you know.
So if you notice that that's happening to you, that the fear is freezing you up,
Yeah.
do you have something? Do you have someone or something that you go to snap you out of it?
I mean,
Or is it different every time?
I also have a really strong belief in God. So that's part of my foundation. And I've been thinking a lot about this lately. There's something I do want to say about this. Right now, the whole world is crying out for justice, right?
Sure.
And I started to think, where does justice come from? What is justice? What is it that the whole world is crying out for? And then I started thinking, what are the foundational worldviews that our society holds from which everything else is built on? So I started to think, what are the important questions that we as human beings ask ourselves? And I came up with 4 of them. Where do we come from? What is our purpose? How do we gauge right and wrong? And where are we going? I think if we can answer those 4 questions that have a strong foundation, it'll guide everything that you do, right? So where do we come from? Well, the main belief, I think, of most people that you ask is that we're a process of evolution. That random atoms came together in a primordial soup, and out of it spawned a biological element that evolved over time and became who you and I are now today. So, okay, that's possible, maybe. Can 6 billion lines of left-hand amino acids or right-hand amino acids come together in a particular way to create a book that describes who you are and how you behave and how you interact with life? Okay. But then where does justice come from that? You know, I was thinking, does justice come from chance? Is justice just a random happening, you know? And if so, then it has no meaning, because if there's no meaning to our existence, then there's no meaning to right or wrong.
Sure.
Or if there is, who gets to decide what is right or wrong, you know? Yeah, I was thinking about the teachings of Nietzsche that said there is no God, and every man has the right for himself to decide what is right or wrong. And then I think about Darwin that said the whole purpose of life is to evolve and to continue and to develop into the perfect organism. So what happens when you combine these 2 philosophies? Well, you get someone like Hitler, who did a perfect job at defining his own rules and pursuing the perfection of life. And actually, when the Nazis were being tried at the Nuremberg trials, their lawyers stood up and said, these gentlemen were just following the laws of their state.
Sure.
And it's not every state sovereign to make their own laws.
Right.
And the judges had a really hard time with that. till one of them stood up and said, is there no law above the law of man? Meaning, is there no moral focal point that is above what you might believe or what I might believe? And only under those terms were they able to convict the Nazis.
Right.
So now we go back to the sense of justice. We're all crying out for justice, but we don't really have a strong concept of where justice comes from. So how do we as society, built on principles where the core foundational principle may not be as stable as we think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would even take it a step further. I don't know that we have a common definition of justice. I mean, I know there's that under the law, but a lot of what we're living through at the moment is that the law is very different in practice than it is on the books, right? And even the interpretation of the laws comes into question constantly, right? Every time there's a lawsuit,
and the laws change from country to country,
state to state,
society to society.
Right, and so, but you're right, we have, it's I don't know, I'm assuming it's a universal human truth that we value fairness.
Yeah.
Right, and as you said, right now we're crying out for justice because certain certain people are treated one way and other people are treated a different way.
Yeah.
Right, and I've seen studies that people will be happy making less money if they know that the other people around them are also making less money.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, that's insane. Right. It's not, insane is a strong word, but it's illogical.
Right. Because fairness and justice kind of go together. So
sure.
if I'm doing, if I'm doing my part and the other community's not doing their part, then how is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, no one wants to be the one that's working harder than everyone else,
right,
or making less money than everyone else, or whatever. There's all these relative things.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I think it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic,
So how does that? So
I have a belief.
You have these four pillars.
I have a belief in a higher power,
Sure.
Yeah. And I don't believe that we're here by randomness. I don't believe that. I mean, I find meaning in my life. I experience love. I care for other people. When someone that I care for dies, I don't replace them with another representation of that person. There's a uniqueness to that person that is special. So it's hard for me to believe that we're experiencing so much meaningful lives over an overarching meaninglessness. And so I do believe there's a higher power, and that is where a lot of my courage comes from. Because I feel like, when I need guidance, when I need support, I have like this personal relationship with someone that I can lean on, that I can rely on, that I can trust in.
So I'm not going to debate theology with you,
Yeah.
but I am going to say that I think.
I mean, we're all entitled,
Oh no! I mean, it's not even.
Have our own beliefs,
it's not even.
sure.
It's. I think it's irrelevant to what I'm about to say, whether we agree or not.
Yeah.
But I think even what you're saying, right? If to the extent that people believe that there's a higher power, there is no consensus about what that is and what it means to each of us in our daily lives and how we're supposed to interact with that, right? And so whether it's even, across religions or within a religion, there's infinite number of definitions of how that meaning affects each one of us, right?
Correct.
And so I guess I'm saying, like, I don't know that solves your problem from the way you're describing it, right? I mean, hopefully it solves it for you, like, because you can find your moral compass relative to your beliefs, right? But I'm just saying that's like we're all sort of left. We're either left to figure that out for ourselves, or we decide to give that power over to someone else, to a priest or a rabbi or a book, one particular book that we read.
A book with a set of beliefs,
Yeah, that we read and interpret a certain way based on the translator who translated that book from the original language, right? Like, none of it is truth in the sense of, I guess.
Yeah, we just got shoved in the deep water, didn't we?
Yeah, I don't know.
Truth is an interesting thing, you know. Can truth be relative? Can there be different versions of the truth?
Sure.
Can truth be exclusive, you know? Like,
right.
It's just a really deep topic.
Yeah.
But for me,
so how does all that affect your path as an entrepreneur, as
sure.
you know,
well, I think
all the things that you are?
I think in the things that I believe in, the greatest gift that we've been given is the power of choice, because we have the ability to choose whether we want to believe or whether we don't want to believe.
Absolutely.
And our ability to choose is what makes us creative. So by nature, our greatest gift is creativity, whether it be to believe or not believe, or to choose this or choose B, or to choose this bass line or choose not this bass line, or choose this drum sound, or to choose is our greatest gift. And to pursue a life of creativity is to pursue a life of choices, you know, and to know that is your greatest gift, to decide and to choose.
I think it's really interesting, and if you read like Stephen Covey, right? He, I think they talk about a definition of success as increasing your ability to choose.
Oh, they do? That's interesting.
Yeah, in a way, right? So he's got this thing of like the gap between stimulus and response is where our freedom of choice exists.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And he kind of says, you know, if you behave a certain way and you end up in prison, well, then your choices are very limited.
Or they're made for you.
That's what I mean, right? Like you have really small number of choices that you're allowed to make at that point.
Right.
And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've created a life that gives you, you know, resources and time and all of these opportunities to make creative choices.
And if you think of jail as punishment and you expound on that,
sure.
Punishment is limiting your choices.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think when we live in fear, we also limit our choices. And there is torment in fear. There's punishment in fear. Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
interesting. I never looked at it that way. So, yeah, I don't know. I think about this stuff from time to time.
No, I'm sure. You talked about the government, you know, regulatory environment changing. What else? What else did you do at the beginning? What were mistakes that you had to work your way out of?
I think maybe one of the main challenges that we had in the beginning was underestimating the importance of marketing. Underestimating the importance of having a clear voice, because obviously the first 15 students that we got was very easy.
Sure.
But then where does the next pool of people come from?
Right.
And we really had to think about who were we, what was our meaning, what was our purpose, and how were we going to get that purpose out there. And one of the first things that, you know, my business partner and I committed to was to never tell someone who you were in an ad or an advertisement, or, you know, we are A and what we do is A, B, and C. You know, I think the value comes when you share something of importance with someone, whether it be a belief or a bit of knowledge. So from the beginning, we decided that it was always going to be about sharing something valuable with someone. And really just the mission statement of empowering artists to live creative lifestyles really says nothing about music production.
Right.
So when you see a school that says, you know, come here to become a music producer, I feel like that's a very narrow focus. But when you say, come learn how to live a creative lifestyle, that's a much broader appeal. And that really is what it is about, you know. How do we take power back to our lives by exercising creativity?
And so how does that get woven into the school experience?
I think it starts with the idea that, you know, a lifestyle is something that's shared. It's a belief that's shared by people of common beliefs. And what do we call that? Well, we call that a collective. So by design, the school was never a university or a school. It was always a collective. It was always about people. And something interesting happened in the first 6 years that I noticed the graduating students are becoming more and more advanced than the previous graduating students. And it wasn't necessarily because our curriculum was changing that quickly. And I boiled it down to something that I called collective intelligence, which is people with the same passion coming together in the same building and sharing resources. So you might have been researching the perfect snare sound for 8 hours, and I might have been researching vocal compression for 6 hours. And we sit down and have lunch together in 3 minutes. We share with each other what it took us 16 hours collectively to learn. And so the upper students were teaching the younger students, and by the time the younger students became upper students, they were more advanced than those upper students, and they were sharing the younger students. And there was a cyclical process of people sharing information that's been a part of our unspoken success. And had I realized that early on, I would have fostered it a lot sooner.
Yeah.
But I think it's like YouTube, you have someone posting a dance move on one side of the country and someone on the other side of the country sees it, and all of a sudden you have this community that's sharing resources and learning from each other. It's a very dynamic way of learning, and we're always looking for ways to expand that, whether it be in-house or through our online programs. But yeah, community, I think it's important.
And so that kind of just happened, right? So now, how did you then adjust the curriculum or your approach, right, to then foster that?
I think one of the most basic ways is we just created a space for it to happen. So in the new building, we dedicated probably in our current building, we dedicated 500-600 square feet. We could just call it a producer's den, where there's no agenda in that room other than for people to come in, set up with a laptop and be next to their peers, just be able to work, drink coffee, talk, congregate. Normally a room like that would be set aside for an actual lecture or other courses, but creating space where people can come together and just share information was one of the first steps in allowing that to organically grow. Creating space for things to happen is, important.
Sure. Yeah.
And we're still figuring out how to continue to do that.
Of course. So, you started, it's the two of you, and I'm sure you started, hiring teachers at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you've got I'm sure a much bigger, more sophisticated organization. What's that like for you? As a founder, kind of giving, I know that's something a lot of people struggle with is like letting go of certain parts of their job. And so how have you been able to navigate that?
That's a really interesting question because I was really involved as the director of education in the program early on, writing a lot of the curriculum, teaching a lot of the courses, being involved in a lot of the marketing events, just wearing all hats possible. There was only two of us.
Yeah.
But then coming to a point where you realize that your capacity to be effective in all those areas is limited by the amount of time that you have, and you have to go out and find people that are more talented, just as passionate, share the same values to help you along this mission. I've been very fortunate to be working with a business partner that was very consumed with the direction of the business early on. And we're to a point now where he gets to run the day-to-day operations, and I get to support him on decisions, and we strategize long-term plans. I've got an amazing director of education that's managing all the instructors, and it's about finding people that are better than you at what you do and bringing them on board and empowering them to continue the work.
What's been the hardest part to give up?
Probably the connection with the students. That's something that I really appreciated and cherished, and I still could do that.
Yeah.
But my personal life suffered a lot because I was in that building 15, 16, 17 hours a day.
Yeah.
And once I started approaching my 50s, I was like, okay, I've given 50 years of my life to music, and as I still want to continue to do that, I want to be more balanced with how I'm spending my time.
Yeah.
So there's other things that I spend my time doing on top of sort of co-managing the business, but yeah, it's all a trade-off, Different seasons have different focuses.
Sure, yeah, of course. So I know you've had some high-profile graduates I know Jaws, Nightmare, Slander.
Yeah.
Some big names come
Yeah.
out of the school.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's others that I don't know.
Yeah, there's Keizo. There's we have a lot of female talent that's coming through the school
Cool.
right now, which is amazing.
Nice.
But yeah, we've had a lot of kids that have come and devoted their entire life without a plan B to pursue this lifestyle.
Sure.
You know?
So how does that, you were talking about marketing earlier, like, when a Jaws comes out of the school and has, big hits and headlining festivals and all that, like, what does that do for you? And how much do you think about, like, marketing that or not?
It's interesting. I think that in the beginning, word of mouth was really powerful for us because the graduates were going out and telling everybody their experience that they had, and they begin living a life of an artist, that's all in, that's devoting all their time to music, that's being wise about their branding, that's being true to who they are and not trying to follow a trend and trying to be unique, and just all these individual pieces of the puzzle that create success. But it's been great for those people to have success, and some of them it's taken them 2-3 years to get to a point where they're on the radar. There's some students that are maybe 4 or 5 years in and they've had just a small portion of that success.
Right.
But one of the first things that we let people know is that there are no guarantees when you come into this career. You're going to get a certificate, but it doesn't mean anything,
Sure.
The path that you're about to create, no one's ever walked before.
Yeah.
You're the one that's going to have to create that path,
Yeah.
So it's very unlike any other career where...
The promoters at Ultra they're not checking your degrees and certificates.
No, they're not, But it's been beautiful to watch success of the graduates. I just spoke to a graduate that was probably from about 7 years ago, and he just put his down payment on his home, and he's really excited to be out in Nashville, and he's still, touring and traveling and, living this life that he had hoped he could live, and it's just really gratifying to have a small fingerprint on that.
So how much, when you think about the success of your graduates, how much is that about picking the right students to allow in versus, whatever they learn when they're in the school?
That's a great question because, a lot of schools that are for profit, their admission process is very cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And they have a goal that they have to meet, and they have a number of seats that they have to fill, and they have quotas, and it's all about the profit margin. We actually probably only accept 30 to 40% of the applicants. And I'm very proud of the admissions department and the director of admissions who have a very thorough screening process, and they just get down to the core of why they want to do this. Do you want to do this because you want to be on stage playing bangers, or do you feel like you have a voice and something that you want to contribute?
Yeah. So
that initial filter is really important. Another thing that ended up working in our favor was not accepting financial aid. So a lot of schools operate on 90% financial aid.
Sure.
That means just about anybody can come and study. But for us, these students, artists, they literally had to work a year or 2 years. They had to save up their money. That was really the first threshold that lets you know they're serious.
Yeah.
I mean, kids that don't get financial aid and they've been working hard for 2 years to get their tuition paid for, once they get there, they're going to be serious about attendance, submitting their homework assignments. I mean, they're completely devoted. They've been devoted for 2 years, even before they walk in the door.
Right.
So it just changes the whole dynamic,
So talk about that a little, because, in the public, discourse, right, the argument about financial aid is that, it empowers people who come from, who don't come from means.
I do agree with that, yes.
To be able to go to college, right? Yeah. And, if it wasn't for the GI Bill, if it wasn't for, various programs.
I agree with you.
Lots of people would have been priced out of college.
Right.
So walk me through that.
Sure. Well, initially, I think one of the reasons why we didn't offer financial aid is because we had started under no accreditation system.
Right.
So even if we wanted to, we couldn't play the game.
Yeah.
But now we are fully accredited. We are able to receive GI bills. We are able to give visas to international students. But I think our admissions process has still been true. We have a limited amount of seats. We're not looking to pack them in.
Sure.
We could have 30 applicants and we could have 2 seats open, but we're not going to plug those in with people that are going to diminish the experience for the rest of the class. We're in the process of considering financial aid, and we're probably going to get there relatively soon. But I think it's very important to be balanced with your use of financial aid as an institution.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were to just accept 10% of our funding from financial aid, it would make a big difference for us.
Right.
But I don't think we would ever want to be so dependent on financial aid that if something happens to that system,
Sure.
The company would be at risk, or that we would be excluding people. But yeah, I think financial aid is important. But I think the use of it extensively to fill seats with the wrong candidates is something that has been the downfall of a lot of schools, actually. I don't want to name any, but you can count the number of schools in arts and production and education that are now going out of business.
Yeah.
And it's exactly for those reasons.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I'm not really taking a position on it. I just, I think
yeah, of course.
I get that you want people that are there for the right reasons.
Right.
And you want people that are there to work hard, and those are it's tough to see that when you're looking at a student's application or you're interviewing them. You don't really know what you're getting, right?
Right.
So I think and certainly I think we could argue that there's a crisis of too much financial aid, especially in the form of loans, right? Student loans.
I mean, for students to come out of an engineering school with $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 of debt on their shoulder.
Yeah.
I mean, how are they going to overcome that?
Sure.
So, but I think that problem is being self-addressed by the industry, because those companies can't sustain, that kind of model anymore.
Yeah. How much do you watch what other schools are offering, and like, are you is that something you think about, this sort of like competitive environment
That's
that you
really
play
interesting. Yeah, not much at all, to be honest with you. We were kind of the anti what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
I think we listen to our current student body the most. They're the ones we listen to. We listen to the collective. They're the one that tells us what their needs are.
So what's something that, like, an innovation or a change or whatever that you got from your students?
Well, like right now we're launching a music business program.
Yeah.
We're having like a very 21st century approach to it as an independent artist, and what are the needs of an independent artist when they partner with the manager. We're also launching a vocal artist program, more with the performance space. And I think combining those 3 segments under one building is a great opportunity for a lot of partnerships to come together to bring strong brands, complete companies together.
Yeah.
Because you have the producers, you have the vocalists, you have the managers, and you have a whole team that can potentially start their career and their relationships under this building, and just spawn great ventures from there. So really excited about that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. But yeah, education's an interesting thing, We just saw the disconnect early on, and we jumped on at a point where technology was starting to boom, and nobody was really addressing laptop producers, and just kind of saw around the bend a little bit. But
I mean, it's great that you're teaching the business, and I know most music schools there's a few business classes or whatever.
Yeah.
Seems like I don't know. It seems that the business is still very misunderstood.
And it changes so rapidly.
Sure. Yeah.
It's constantly changing. So how do you keep up with understanding how audiences are consuming music? Is music the product, or is music the market? Is that the marketing? Do you spin that into a brand? Just so many questions. Well, now with the whole pandemic going on, tours are kind of going to the wayside, but a lot of people
Right.
are starting to monetize, the representation of music and performance online in a new way. And we're just evolving and adapting, So the business has to evolve and adapt as well.
Yeah, I mean, I always, I think about careers in this business, and I feel like, whatever you learned, whatever you're good at, to get started, what that does is it buys you 5-10 years, if you're lucky, to learn all the other shit you need to learn, right?
So you're saying that your talent and what your specialty is will carry you through the time needed to gather the other assets to make you complete.
So kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Like if you're good at performing, that buys you the opportunity to learn songwriting. Obviously, some people just write songs.
Right.
I'm speaking of one sort of path, right?
Yeah.
But if you can go out and play covers, right, that gets you the momentum and the opportunity to then go learn how to be a musician, how to make music,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
If you can do that and you can make a record that anybody wants to hear, that then buys you the opportunity to learn the business,
Right.
right? In the traditional way that we've been doing it. And I think, we see a whole industry of littered with careers that didn't make it all the way. They didn't become the Shaka Khans because they didn't learn those pieces along the way, right? Like how I think we were talking about this on our hike, right? Like, when your first record is your biggest hit, you're kind of screwed, right? Because you have to, and I think there's a few reasons, right? But one is that it forces you into having to learn how to run a business in an industry that you are brand new to.
Yeah.
And that's too much for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's important to have a game plan, to understand how you're going to get a return on your investment. What's your plan 2 years from now, 4 years from now? Because all you're doing is developing these structures of potential.
Yeah.
Whether that be cash, that be exposure, that be a fan base, and then you have to have a strategy of how to continue expanding that and building something from that. It's an interesting career to pursue music these days.
For sure.
I really applaud the people that have the courage to do it.
Absolutely.
But it's a beautiful lifestyle, to be able to wake up and be creative and have an impact. I think now more today than ever we need artists. There was a revolutionist in Scotland that said, "Let me write the songs of a nation. I don't care who writes his laws." So even then, he particularly knew the power of music and the power to invoke social consciousness and change. And I feel like we're lacking a little bit of an artist's voice right now in this whole situation. We don't really have our Martin Luther King now.
Right.
We don't really have someone that's leading that fight for justice.
Yeah. I mean, it feels a little bit like some artists are waking up to that.
Yeah.
But I also think that's that was also a product of its time, right?
Yeah.
Like,
but I think it's good in a way too, because we're all now. It's not about who the leader is. It's about what are we going to do individually.
That's right. Go back to that story you were telling at the beginning about Ultra. So you were talking about this idea. I'm not going to ask for anything. I'm going to be of service.
Yeah.
Right. How much is that your way of operating?
I think initially it's been great in terms of the way that we've been able to grow the company, establish relationships. A lot of times when you go to a business meeting and there's a potential for partnership, each person knows what they need from the other person. And there's a tendency to want to ask for what you need. But when you realize that you have value and that the other person, maybe they're needing something from you, if you are the first person to offer, what can I do for you? How can I be of service? How can I support what you're doing? In the end, many times the person on the other side is going to know better what they can do for you than even what you can ask.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a great strategy for me. I'll give you one example. When I just started school, I was trying to figure out how to get the word out, and I had 30 minutes left on my meter. And I told myself, I'm going to sit here at this meter at 5 o'clock, at 4:30, until the meter runs out. And hopefully I'll have one last inspiration and something to do while I'm sitting here in Hollywood. And if not, then I'm going to drive home. So I just sat there patiently, and there was a woman in the boutique store that thought I was strange because I wasn't on my phone. I was just sitting in the car, kind of just sitting there. And a friend of mine called, and I was, hey, how are you? What are you doing? He goes, I just finished talking to a friend of mine. He's a senior editor at BPM magazine. I'm like, oh, cool. What's his name? Blah, blah, blah. Started talking. And I said, their offices aren't in Hollywood by any chance, are they? He's like, yeah, they're in Hollywood. I'm like, where are they? So he gave me the address. I'm like, cool. So that was my impetus to go to BPM magazine. I had no agenda. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. But I walked in, I told the receptionist, I'd like to speak to David Ireland. He goes, well, what do you want to see him about? I said, well, I started a music production school, and I think we can create some synergy. She's like, okay, he'll be done in 10 minutes. So he walks out. He doesn't know who I am. He's like, can I help you? I said, yeah. I started an electronic music school. Our companies are both, appealing to the same culture, and I think there's some positive things we can do. He goes, okay, well, come in. And for about an hour and a half, he just asked me tons of questions. And he goes, so why are you here? I said, I'm just here to see how I can be of service. And he goes, you know about gear, right? Yeah. He goes, how about if I send you new gear every week, and every month you write a one-page article about it, and then we'll give you a half-page to a full-page ad in the magazines about the school. And I said, are you asking me to be your senior gear editor? And he's like, that's exactly what I'm asking you to do. I said, done deal. And we shook hands on it. And I started making all these relationships with Native Instruments, all the keyboard companies and all the accessory companies. And that was just an example of,
that's great.
Going somewhere with someone that had a commonality and asking how you can be of service, and them thinking of a way that they could serve you even better, So
Love that.
It takes a lot of courage to walk into an office and talk to the senior editor and not really know what you're going to say, But life is like that, We all have to take risks. We're so afraid to call people sometimes because we think they're on this level or they're above us, or they're out of reach.
Yeah, I mean, I think you either think people either think, like this person is further along than I am. They're more successful, smarter, richer, whatever. So what could I possibly offer them? Right. Or they think, or they're afraid of being taken advantage of. Right. That I have to ask for what I want because I have to stand up for myself. Right. Which, standing up for yourself is now you're in a fighting stance. Right. Right. Someone's gonna lose. Right.
I mean, let me ask you this. If you got a phone call and some kid in Nebraska said, hey, I'm a big fan of your podcast. I love what you're doing. I'm inspired to do the same thing. I don't know much about it. Do you mind if we just Zoomed maybe once a week for a month and I could pick your brain and we could talk? I mean, wouldn't you kind of be inspired that someone would...
I almost always say yes to that stuff, for sure.
I feel like I would say yes to that person.
Yeah.
But, how many people have that desire to connect with people, but they don't have the courage to pick up the phone and do it? Right. So we need more of that.
Do you teach that to your students?
I don't think we have a course necessarily in that, but...
Hopefully it's woven in there because those are important life skills.
Yeah. And that's it, man. I guess it all comes down to having the courage not to be fearful in certain situations,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it, man. Well, I'm excited to see what's next. Hopefully we'll be out in the outdoors. We'll come see the school.
Yeah.
So what's the plan? I know it's hard to...
Well, right now...
It's hard to tell what...
we're just waiting for, the authorities to say it's safe for us on some level to come back together. Yeah. And we'll be ready to open our doors and welcome our students back and get back to business, I can't wait for them to see the new building. You know?
It's in Burbank, you said?
It's in Burbank, very
Yeah.
close to right off IKEA Way,
Okay.
on a street called Tahunga.
Mm-hmm.
And we're taking up 2 floors of a standalone building with plenty of parking, which is good for us.
Nice.
But we got to custom design the whole space, just kind of gut it and start from
That's cool.
scratch.
Yeah.
So there's like teaching theaters with staggered seating and like a 50-seat performance theater. We've never really had a space that big before.
Nice.
Analog mastering studio, a couple of tracking rooms, and lots of labs, studios for them to work in. Administrative offices. Yeah, I can't wait for people to experience it. You know,
Love it.
you have to come down and check it out.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
For sure. Man, thanks for doing this. It's so much fun.
Thank you for coming down.
How should everyone find Icon Collective or you? Or
They can go to iconcollective.edu,
okay.
or they can do Instagram Icon Collective, or they
Nice.
can do Icon Collective Facebook.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. So much fun.
Well, thank you.
We'll definitely have to do it again when we can come to the school.
Yeah, you got to come down for another hike.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, that was David Alexander on Rebel Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Let us know what you thought. You can leave us a comment on Twitter or Facebook. It's at Rebel Radio Net. I promise to pretend to read them and maybe even respond. And most importantly, come back next week for more Rebel Radio. Peace.